Coming to you from 8122 Production Studios in the heart of the 607, this is Horror Zone 607. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And remember, you can always join the conversation using hashtag HZ607.
Welcome to Horror Zone 607. I'm your host, Mike C., back at it with another episode of the show where we talk all things horror and bring you the week's biggest horror movie news. A lot of stuff to talk about this week. Kind of surprised we have as much news as we do. So, another big week here. And, we've also talked about last week the original Psycho, and this week we're going to be carrying on with that series, and we're going to be discussing Psycho 2. So we're going to have a good conversation about that. But before I can do any of that with you guys out there listening, we've got our favorite co-host in the studio. He will make you feel like a natural woman. He's Rich.
That's right. I'm always about making people feel like a natural woman, no matter how you identify. I'm equal opportunity. I'm very equal opportunity. But yes,
I feel like a natural woman right now just talking with you.
Exactly, as you should. I treat you very ladylike.
You really do.
I'm excited for the show. There's a lot we just talked about in the pre-show. There's a lot of news. I dip our toes in momentarily. And, of course, week 2 of 5 weeks of Psycho. I'm actually looking forward to this one. This is the one that I'm looking forward probably the most to. Little hint there. Outside, and then, I'm least looking forward to the last week. I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm just saying. I'm going to be like an open book. The last week I'm least looking forward to.
Right.
Yes. But with that being said, though, we have a ton of news, as you pointed out. Let's just dive right in, Mike.
So the first piece of news I have this week is where I turned up this week. I am actually in New Hampshire.
Oh, you're in New Hampshire this week. That's a far way from where you were last week.
Yes, I've traveled across the country far and wide. I've searched, and here I am. I am in New Hampshire, in an undisclosed bunker in New Hampshire.
Oh, that's awesome. Good job.
So, I just thought we'd get that out of the way first here and let everybody know, if anybody's listening in New Hampshire, look for me. I'm there, but not for long. So that's that. Yeah. We got that out of the way.
Good. But, at least we know where you are.
Yeah. So now the real news. So this one kind of came out of nowhere. We didn't know exactly what to think when they announced that there was going to be a new Scream movie, if it was going to be Scream 5, if it was going to be a complete reboot, a complete remake. We didn't know what to expect. And Neve Campbell recently was interviewed by YouTube's Jake Hamilton and said she's actually been in contact with the new directors. And although she admitted to being initially apprehensive about doing another one without Wes Craven, just because of how much respect she had for him, and didn't want to do anything that would tarnish his name, she actually said after speaking with them she's very interested in coming back.
Oh, awesome. We still don't know a ton about this movie because God knows if they were even looking to have her back. I understand they reached out to her. It gives us a little more hope since they reached out. At least they're looking for input. That's the very least.
Right.
I'm not sure. Like I said, I could see it both ways. We talked about it before. I was hoping they wouldn't go like the full-on remake version. I was hoping they would either be a continuation, i.e. Scream 5, or if they were going to do something different, how about something in the same world, just a continuation, if you will. That's what I'm hoping more for that than I am a remake. So reaching out to Neve Campbell makes me think that one of the two that I'm looking forward to is going to be what's happening here instead of a full-on just remake. I think we're either going to get the completion or a continuation of the original series with Sidney Prescott, or we're going to get a world where Sidney Prescott exists, at least.
Right. Yeah, it's, obviously there's going to be a lot more news to come with this, and with everything currently going on in the world, we don't even know, if this will end up panning out. but I think it would be really cool. If they do get her back.
Go ahead.
What's that?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we've heard in the past, over and over again that David Arquette would love to do another one. So I think that he'd be on board, if they can get the band back together, so to speak. Would they be able to get Courtney Cox back?
Yeah. Why not? I think honestly, right now, let's be honest, and I'm not trying to be like, and this is not me being mean or taking away from anything. They're all not really doing much right now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm not just talking about because of time of COVID. I'm talking about like even before this. I mean, Arquette was doing so little that he went back to wrestling.
Right.
Courtney Cox had the TV show on, but I don't know what the standing of that is anymore. I mean, she hasn't really been doing much past that, but really she doesn't ever need to work again because she's got that Friends money that's, is never ending supply. But I think all of them enjoyed the movies. They did come back, in 4, even though Courtney Cox and David Arquette are no longer together, they worked together at 4, which they weren't together when they worked together then. So you got to, I don't think there's any animosity. I think that group of people really loves being around each other. So I'm assuming if it's calling for a Scream 5 with the original cast, I believe we'll get the full ensemble. As far as what you said before with everything happening, I think that this movie will happen no matter what. It's just the time when it'll happen because of, obviously, I'm sure it's being written right now and being redone. I wouldn't be surprised that if when this is all said and done, they'll be going right into pre-production. In casting.
I hope so.
And the reason I say that is because strike while the iron's hot. I said it last week on the show, and I think that it stands to be truth. In times where there's like tough times, if you will, horror seems to thrive, and we're going to be coming into a very this right now is a very trying time. People want to take their minds off of things, and for whatever reason, whenever it's trying times, horror is at its game. Not to mention right before this, we were in a boom of horror. So I mean, I think horror is only going to get bigger in the next 2 to 5 years. We're going to see a huge influx of horror movies, whether they were remakes, whether they were reimaginings, whether it's original stuff, because we had all that coming out in the past 2 years. I was nervous in the past, as you know, and I've told you that I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I thought it was going to drop sooner. But I think that, if you're looking for a silver lining, I think the silver lining in the whole COVID pandemic, murder hornets, and everything else going on in the world, I think that this is horror is going to get that silver lining, because I think. Whereas before it might have started to taper off about now, we only have another good 2 years of this really big boom again. I think it's going to extend this out another few years. So I think about 5 more years of good horror boom off the back of the everything going off on now. So, I mean, it sounds bad to say, but if you want to look for a silver lining and you're a horror fan, I think this is going to be it for us. Like I said, the downside is I'm not looking forward to all the pandemic movies.
Right. And, just to kind of touch base on that, and one of the things you just said there, I'm not going to get into it because I didn't even read the article, but earlier today I did read an article that there's already plans for a Murder Hornet horror movie.
Oh, why wouldn't
it? It will happen. You had to know that was coming. So,
well, I mean,
it didn't take long.
It is something made for Hollywood. Let's be honest.
Oh yeah.
Like this, like the world, the events of 2020 is really a year made for Hollywood. This is like somebody writing a bad movie script. This is like a sci-fi asylum movie, and it's every year. So it's kind of, it's not surprising anything. Right now you could tell me anything and I wouldn't be surprised by it.
Right.
What do we got next in the news?
So we got some Mike Flanagan news. We like talking about Mike Flanagan here on the show.
Is Mike Flanagan wearing a flannel shirt, though?
I wish that he was wearing a flannel shirt.
Flanagan and flannel. I think he should do that.
Yeah. That could be a great reality show.
I need
when his career starts to fizzle out.
We should reach out to him. I think that all his Instagram photos and stuff, he should always wear flannel, because then people will equate flannel to Flanagan. Flanagan and flannel.
Right. Yeah.
Or dress like Ned Flanders. You could dress like Ned Flanders, and it'll be Flanagan, Flanders, and Flannel. Wow.
Right.
I messed that up a little bit.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
I see where you're going with
this. But
anyways,
what is the great Mike Flanagan up to now?
So, actually, we got news about a couple of things here, as I mentioned. So, first and foremost, now, I'm not familiar with the work. I wish that the professor was with us today, but he got a little boo-boo in his brain last night. He reached out to us shortly before showtime, and unfortunately, he couldn't drift into the studio because he's drifting around town with a bit of a headache today from excessive drinking.
You could say that. I was going to say he's a little hungover. He's
a
had
little hungover. He's got a little bit of the hangover today.
he had a little bit too much of the sauce, if you will.
He had a little bit too much sauce. He got a little saucy last night. So, this would be right up his alley because I'm sure he's probably familiar with the work.
He's probably read the book.
Probably. But we know Mike Flanagan's been involved in more than one Stephen King project in the past.
Yes.
And he's going to be writing and producing a new film adaptation of Stephen King's Revival. He also has an option to direct the film as well if he chooses to.
Okay, so I did a little bit of research. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of the book. I've never read it, so I can't give you. And if I'm a little off, don't crucify me because it's just what I've read on the internet and in preparing. So basically, the revival takes place. It looks like in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So it's a little older setting, and it is about a minister and his wife going to a new town to start a church. And the weird goings on. Is there an afterlife? Addiction? It deals with addiction, I guess, as well. I'm assuming this is something up Stephen King's alley. Of course, as we know, he did have an addiction problem. So he has been very public about writing about it. So I'm thinking it's one of the books where he wrote about that as well, because that's what it's saying in the synopsis. Not without going, because the only ones that I could find were super wordy. So I'm just giving you the cliff notes. Is something about the wife and possibly demonic possession. So it's a wild ride. It's definitely a Stephen King wild ride. With that being said, this is the kind of book that Mike Flanagan has had success recreating in the past. Let's be honest. I mean, there's all the stuff he's done with all the King stuff he's done has been very supernatural-esque, if you will. He hasn't touched on any of the other kind of genres from King, and he's done a very good job at those. So I'm hopeful that this will also be very good. Also, it's to be noted, the book came out in 2014, so this is a quick turnaround for a Stephen King book to be adapted into a film. Because most King books that get adapted are ones that are older. Let's be honest. So it's kind of interesting.
I thought that even Dr. Sleep was kind of a quick turnaround, even though that had been out for several years. But yeah, when I saw that this was only a few years old, I was kind of like, well, interesting. Must be.
Well, with Sleep, though, it's a little different because if you think Dr. Sleep was off the back of being a sequel of The Shining. So, I mean, source material is a little older, so, it's got a comfortable feel to it, if you will. Whereas this is a completely different book. This is something that's standing on its own in the Stephen King library. I mean, obviously, that everything ties in the Stephen King universe, but this is also it's its own thing. It's like taking The Stand or whatever and putting it out there. So I think that this is a really cool take. I think this is going to be something right in the wheelhouse of Mike Flanagan. He loves doing that kind of haunted house spirit, poltergeist kind of stuff, as we've seen him be very successful with it. And this is looking like one of those haunted house possession kind of movie projects, if you will. Right.
Yeah, we'll see. Time will tell if it's going to be good, but if Mike Flanagan's involved, I'm interested.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm in. You had me at Mike Flanagan. But what else is he involved in? He's got his hands in a lot of pots, it looks like right now.
Yeah, he does, because he's also going to be adapting, and this one I'm not familiar with either, but he's going to be adapting a novel called The Midnight Club for Netflix. This is a story that takes place at a place called Rotterdam Home. It's a hospice for terminally ill teenagers. A group of patients begin to tell scary stories and eventually make a pact where whichever one dies first will contact the others from beyond the grave.
Interesting. I think that that is interesting because if I'm not correct, remember Are You Afraid of the Dark? Wasn't the group of kids there known as the Midnight Club or Midnight Society? It was a Midnight Society.
I believe, yeah.
It's a meeting of the Midnight Society. So I mean,
right.
This is kind of close to that because when I first read it, I was like, wait a minute, is this the source material for that show? And then it's not.
Right.
Once again, this is up Flanagan's alley. I mean, I just said it. He does very well with these supernatural, haunted house, haunting / possession, whatever you want to call the genre. He does very well with it. So, I mean, this is a perfect thing. Netflix paying good money out to Mike Flanagan, who has done amazing work for them in the past. Let's be honest. I mean, Haunting a Hill House is one of their top selling shows.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's not
really good.
Yeah, right. There's a lot, but I'm just saying, if you think about it, like, there's no gamble here. This is in his wheelhouse. Right. He's been proven to do good shit for Netflix. I'm assuming the show's or is it a show or a movie? I missed that part.
Yeah, it's going to be it just says that it's going to be done for Netflix. It doesn't.
Okay, it doesn't specify.
I didn't come across one way or the other to see.
Okay. I just get curious, but either way, no matter what it is, it's in his wheelhouse. I'm sure it's gonna. Once again, you know me, I'm not into the haunted house spiritual stuff as much, but I like Flanagan's work. He does a good job. He's one of the guys that doesn't rely on my problem in that is is the tropes, all the tried and done tropes that you're just tired of. And Flanagan doesn't do that. Flanagan is finds a way into his own bubble, and so with both these projects, they're right in his wheelhouse. I think they're going to be another killer home runs for Mike Flanagan. So I'm going to be looking forward to these, probably both of these by 2021, 2022. So I'm definitely in.
Right. Let's hope anyway it's by then. I don't know. I know that you guys are feeling the same way I am, but I am ready for normalcy.
Yeah,
I am ready to go to the movies again. I'm ready to see all these things that were supposed to be coming out.
We may be further than we are, so we got to just focus on what we can. I got to keep that. I'm trying to be as positive as possible, because if I get trapped inside my own head, it's not a good place.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. So, but moving on from Mike Flanagan, there was another movie that we've been kind of hearing bits and pieces about, but we know that Fede Alvarez was going to be involved in yet another reboot of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I came across an article earlier today, actually, that kind of discusses a little bit about where this thing is going. A little bit of, some plot details and things like that. So I'll just kind of read the synopsis. This was JoeBlow.com that there was an article on here about it. So they sent in one of their people did a deep dive and found this information out. So I'm just going to read what he found out. It says, interestingly, the character is listed as Leatherface, a.k.a. Kenny. So no more Jed, no more Thomas Brown Hewitt. Now his name is going to be Kenny. There have been a few different interpretations of the killer in the past, and he has been renamed several times in the various origin stories. In this telling, he is 60 years old and characterized as having a big build. He is not a bodybuilder and may even be slightly obese. He also wears church clothes that are too tightly fitted. Leatherface is additionally described as complex, though he's also listed as a non-speaking role. He primarily expresses himself with guttural noises that range from a howling belly laugh to a pig-like squeal. His time is spent inside watching TV, which is something that triggers his laughter. It's also revealed that he shields his face in an effort to avoid his picture being taken. From there, it actually kind of goes into the actual plot synopsis. It says that this is going to be about two sisters currently listed as Melody and Dreama. The older sister, Melody, is a 25-year-old San Francisco moneymaker who drags her younger teenage sister with her to Texas on a business trip, out of fear of leaving her alone in the city. On the other hand, Dreama is an amateur photographer, and should be noted she is in a wheelchair and is presumably disabled. This film is seemingly setting up a whole new mythology and placing the two sisters, the city girl and the other with special needs, in a rural country, leaving them out of their respective elements, both culturally and physically. End quote.
Intriguing. I don't know. I'm still on the fence. I love Fede Alvarez. I'm sure he's going to do a good job, da-da-da-da. But, I mean, how many times do we have to go back to the well?
I know.
And change it. Like, every time somebody goes to the well, they change it. Like, and I mean, not like little changes. Let's change the name. Let's change this. Let's change that. It's like, it's getting crazy.
Yeah. The last few times it hasn't worked, and these things have been so panned that it's ridiculous, especially the most recent one that was called Leatherface. Not to be confused with Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 from 1990. So we actually have two movies named Leatherface now, but it's just, I don't know. It kind of sounds like they're just reimagining the original one again. You have somebody that's in a wheelchair, a sister that's in a wheelchair. The original had Franklin, the brother that was in a wheelchair. They go to Texas for one thing or another, and, they come across Leatherface and his family. I don't know. I think at this point, if they're going to do another one, I don't know. I'd almost rather see a straight up sequel that goes back to the roots of the original one, that goes back to the roots of maybe in like the first two or three movies. I think that the first three, although Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 was kind of a little off kilter, those were the three best in the entire series, at least in the original series. we both discussed how we're big fans of the remake, and to a lesser degree the prequel, the one called The Beginning. At least it was kind of closely associated with the remake. I wouldn't have been opposed to seeing a sequel to that.
No, me too. I'm with you. I just, like I said, I have hope because it's Fede Alvarez, but that's my only hope at this point, because it's just like we're just going to the well. I mean, I guess it's got to be done.
Right. And, keep in mind, too, with this one, we're big fans of Fede Alvarez's work as a director. He's not going to be directing this. He's just producing it, so he might just kind of have say in what's going on. I don't know. I saw this, and at first I was like, oh, great, we got news. And then as I read it, I was kind of like, oh, boy, this is going to be just as big of a bust as the last couple of movies were.
Oh, I agree.
So I don't know.
Like I said, I'm not sure, but we'll play that one by ear as it comes, and hopefully when we get more concrete stuff, we can, keep digging in. But yeah, we'll be talking about it.
Right. And I just want to say, lastly with this, our good friend Luke, who's been on the show a few times, he's always referred to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series as the choose your own adventure of horror. It's those movies, you can kind of watch any of them at any time, and you don't really need to have seen one of the previous ones to understand what's going on. They really are kind of choose your own adventure. It's kind of become a mess. So I don't know. Does it really hurt the legacy of the series? Not really. So,
no, I agree with you.
We'll see.
I definitely agree with you.
Right. So next up, we have a very special birthday today. Today, when we're recording it, today is Saturday, May 9th. It's going to be a few days before the show hits, but we're actually we're doing the show on Saturday, May 9th, and it's a very, very special birthday today. It's the 40th birthday for a very good friend of ours, and that friend is the Friday the 13th. It came out 40 years ago today. Happy birthday, Friday the 13th.
Absolutely. 40 years ago and still living strong. As a matter of fact, last week, of course, we talked about the Steel box set coming out for the 40th anniversary that you can pick up here very soon. It did get pushed back a little bit, unfortunately, due to circumstances. It's a great movie. We would not have the slasher element without this movie. Obviously Halloween was before it, but Friday the 13th took it to the level that it needed to go to grow and succeed, and it's where we're at today, all the way even until talking about 5 weeks of Psycho. If Psycho was a great movie, it was a legendary film, as we talked about last week, but does it have the staying power if we don't have Halloween in Friday the 13th? Because it's the granddaddy to the slasher film. So without the slasher genre coming in and really making something like that popular, maybe new eyes wouldn't be turned on to that old product, and that's sad, but that happens a lot in entertainment and especially movies. So I'm really thinking that one of the pivotal movies of all time is really Friday the 13th in 1980. Without that movie, I don't even know. I don't know where horror is as a whole. Because think about it, we would have lost everything. Without Friday the 13th, you don't end up with the whole slasher movement in the 80s, which created the golden era of horror. You don't end up. I don't believe without Friday the 13th, you have a Freddy Krueger. There's no Nightmare on Elm Street. I don't believe that, a lot of the other date ones, if you will, because as much as we love Halloween, and Halloween's a great movie, if you're putting the two movies next to each other, Halloween is the better movie as far as how it's shot and everything. But that movie isn't really the true slasher. It might be the father to the slasher movies, but it's not a true slasher film. As you've pointed out in the past, It's more of a thriller with stalking. Yes, there's kills, I get it, but that's not the main focus. The main focus is him stalking his prey, and it's very creepy. Without that, the slasher film, though, is just killing and just, there's stalking involved. I get it. But at the same time, it's more focused on the deaths and the body tolls. And without Friday the 13th, we don't get any of those other ones. We talked about April Fool's Day a few weeks ago. You don't have that movie because that movie's definitely inspired. You don't have things like Sleepaway Camp. You don't have, you can go on and on. I could sit here and list them all day. So it'd be a different world to live in. There'd be no Scream. We were talking about Scream earlier. Scream doesn't exist in a world where there's no slashers. Just saying. Because what rules of horror movies? What rules of horror movies would there be without Friday the 13th? All the rules in Scream came pretty much from Friday the 13th.
I agree 100%. It's one of the greats. It's one of the best, and I don't know about you. I'm gonna bake a cake later, put some candles on it, sing happy birthday,
and then cut it with a machete. You got to cut it with a machete.
Cut it with a machete.
Got to cut it with a machete.
Gonna have all of my friends here, so it'll be me,
yourself, and you,
and that's it. And that's about it.
Unfortunately, we can, you know what? We can, if it makes you feel better, we can Zoom. We'll Zoom. We'll get everybody Zoom, and we'll have a birthday party. We'll sing happy birthday. Unfortunately, we can't share the cake because only one of us has the cake at their house.
Yeah.
So you might as well just get a small cake. Just get a small cake.
Right. And of course I'll have to ruin the party by, naturally taking my pants off, which, I usually do in the studio.
Wait, hold on.
When we record.
Wait a minute. You mean people use Zoom with pants on?
I thought that most people did.
Nobody told me you're supposed to wear pants while on Zoom.
Oh, so you don't wear them either?
No,
okay.
no.
I'm not alone.
I also don't wear them on Skype. And currently, I'm Skyping with you, so I'm pantsless. I might be. I'm in studio. I'm not at the 8122 production studio because, as you know, COVID. But we are in Studio C, the makeshift bunker studio, and I'm in.
Right.
I'm in just my boxing drawers. I do have a hoodie on. It's a little chilly today here in the Northeast.
Yeah. It's May 9th, and we got snow. In fact, it's actually it's snowing out as we speak.
Yes,
believe it or not.
Yes, so, I know. The sun was out and it was snowing even. It's kind of funny.
I believe I saw it's the coldest that it's been since 1978, which is the year I was born.
Well,
so
at least
it's been a long time.
At least the heat works in the makeshift bunker studio. So
yeah,
it's all good.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, here in New Hampshire, it's crazy. Thank God I have heat down here. So, what would I do without it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just want to update something too that we were talking about before. You think I would have caught this? The actual headline says this: the Flanagan series, The Midnight Club. It is going to be a series on Netflix. So I just wanted to reiterate that. It says right in the title of the article that I found it in that he's adapting this as a series for Netflix.
I wish you weren't on the
sound. I think I paid attention.
I wish you weren't on the iPad so I could play the wah 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 sound because that's what you get.
It stinks.
Well, no, it wouldn't be it stinks. It's you fail. You might have even gotten the fail horn. Ba-dum, ba-dum, and that might be it. See, I'm doing it myself. I got to do all the extra work now because you're not in studio.
I deserve that. So it's all good, though. So I got some more exciting news as far as I'm concerned. So I've mentioned a couple of times on the show, back towards the end of the year last year, there was a book that came out called Taking Shape, Developing Halloween from Script to Screen. And it was basically all interviews from sometimes people that you haven't really heard from in the making of the different Halloween movies, all of the Halloween movies, including the Rob Zombie ones. And it's a really good book. I started reading it. I haven't finished it, but it's really good. And I urge everybody that's a fan of the Halloween series to pick it up. It's excellent. Well, they're already working on a sequel. There's going to be a new book coming out called Taking Shape 2. And it may be out as early as this summer, but they are expecting it out this summer or this fall. And this one is going to be exploring all of the Halloween sequels that we never got. So we know that there's been a lot of talk of those over the years, different ones that were supposed to happen that didn't come to be. Once again, these guys did an excellent job with their first one. I'm excited to hear about this.
Awesome. I can't wait for it. I hope I talked about it after I came back from ScareCon talking to Doug Bradley. I hope they put that story in there about how they were going to do Halloween versus Hellraiser.
I'm sure that'll be in there.
I talked about it here on the podcast, and it was going to be written by Carpenter and directed by no, it was going to be written by Clive Barker and directed by Carpenter. I said it backwards. Either way, it would have worked just fine. But yeah, that was the original plan. So I hope that's in there in a little more detail because that was one of those holy shit moments. I'll even drop the S-bomb on it when I was at ScareCon sitting next to him and he said that and the whole room went, what? So I'm assuming that'll be there and plus many, many more, hopefully.
Yeah, the only thing that they specifically mentioned was the one that Quentin Tarantino was supposed to be involved in, but which I'm glad that didn't happen personally. This might be blasphemous, but I'm not a fan of Quentin Tarantino's work, period. So I'm kind of glad that didn't happen. We all know how I feel about Halloween 2018, and something tells me if that movie had happened, I would have felt about the same way. But that's the one thing that they did mention would be in there. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm kind of, interested to hear all of the details, all the juicy details of the Halloween films that did not come to be.
Right on.
Next up, now last week I know that we mentioned that The Last of Us Part 2 has a new release date of June 19th. And, we joked around. I said that it should be coming out with that news. It'll likely be coming out in December of 2096 or something like that. I joked around about it. Well, the creative director and co-lead writer, Neil Druckmann, actually said it's gone gold and it will meet its release date of June 19th. So we're a mere month away from The Last of Us Part 2 finally coming out. It's going to happen this time.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah. I'm still afraid to do the pre-order on it. I ended up pre-ordering a new elliptical instead.
So I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I will too, but something tells me this time it's actually coming, and I could not be more excited for this game. More video game news. This one kind of came out of nowhere. There's a new DLC coming out for Mortal Kombat 11 called Aftermath, and it's going to feature RoboCop along with a new story.
Yeah, it's a new expansion. It's a little more expensive than most DLCs, and as a bonus, you get RoboCop.
Yeah,
I'm interested to see where it goes. RoboCop is not the basis of the story. The story looks like it's based on some of the ninjas we haven't seen in a while. Mortal Kombat fans are all clamoring of who it could be.
Right.
Different, ones that have not been in the video game this year. So hopefully we get a couple awesome characters there. But, it's a nice little bonus to have RoboCop. Remains to be seen. I do believe it's sitting at a price range between $30 and $40, is from what I understand.
$39.99.
Yeah.
Or you can also get it, Mortal Kombat 11 Aftermath plus the Combat Pack bundle for $49.99.
Yeah, which will give you the other DLCs they come out with. Because the other ones, there's going to probably be a couple other DLC drops for this as well. It's a way to keep the game alive. I mean, a lot of other games have done it. I'm surprised Mortal Kombat hasn't done this sooner. But I mean, obviously in the situations we're in now, I'm sure that's probably what's pushed this instead of them just developing something for another game.
Right. The way I look at this, I waited a long time for Mortal Kombat 10. And I ended up getting it. Actually, I ended up getting it for free. I had a points thing that I got at work, and I was actually able to use that on video games. One of many things I could spend my points on, and that was actually available. So I got that, and it was a version that had all of the DLC. It had like the Xenomorph was in it, Leatherface. It kind of had like all the DLC already included in it, as a lot of games do after they've been out for a while. So I think I'm going to wait for this one to come out when it's like a whatever version of the game that comes with all the DLC included, where it's like $19.99. So I think I'll probably wait for that, but I get bored with these games easily. But it's one I want to check out. It's got some pretty cool characters in it, so eventually I'll get it. The cool thing about this is it actually has the voice and likeness of Peter Weller.
Yes.
For RoboCop. So I thought that was kind of cool.
A lot of people a lot of people were shocked about that, but it shouldn't be too shocking because outside of the remake that they did, the RoboCop remake, he has actually done all the voice incarnations for RoboCop, including the TV series episodes and like special appearances. He's voiced over or been there in person for all of them. So he's been very loyal to the character.
He really has. So, I thought that was kind of a cool thing that he's going to be doing that, to kind of be back in character again. So it is what it is. If you're a fan of the Mortal Kombat series, there you go. RoboCop. I'm going to turn our attention to some more TV series news. American Horror Story Season 10 may actually be changing themes in the wake of COVID-19. There's still no word on the theme, but series creator Ryan Murphy said he may have to put whatever the original plan was on hold and do something different. It's also expected that there's not going to be a season in 2020 at this point, which I don't think is any shock at this point.
Interesting.
But,
It's telling. It's telling what this could have been possibly about.
Yeah,
because the only reason I can think about putting it on hold is it was hitting too close to home.
Right.
Because if you're going to change the whole thing,
sort of a virus.
Yeah, that's I don't know, but I'm just saying. I'm assuming it has to be something like that because if you think about it, what is the only other reason why you would change the direction of the show or the season if it wasn't for the fact that it's touching close to what's going on in the world currently?
Right.
So I mean, maybe that
in the teaser it just showed a person crawling out of like a wet lake type thing out onto like some grass. So it's hard to say because he does that. He'll show like random things and they don't necessarily.
Maybe we just
It
had a
doesn't
bad
mean that
vantage.
the series is going to be what it is.
I was going to say maybe we had a bad vantage point and they're just climbing out of a bunker or something.
Could be.
You
Could
never
be.
know. So maybe very well. I mean, that's the only thing I could wrap my head around. Why else would you change what was supposed to be unless you were like, ooh, man, this is a little too close to what's going on, so nobody's going to be entertained by it. Because honestly, people want escapism. They don't want to be reminded.
Right. Yeah. Time will tell. He did also say something. He kind of came out and kind of described what Macaulay Culkin's role was going to be about. He was going to be some really intense character that was going to have some erotic scenes with Kathy Bates' character. So, interesting. I don't know what to think about that.
I'm kind of glad that didn't happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to see that.
It still may.
I definitely still don't know if I want to see that.
No. You know what? You should want to see that. Everybody should want to see Macaulay Culkin and Kathy Bates having erotic relations.
I view Kathy Bates as like a grandmother figure. That's just weird to me. But that's because she's been there my whole life. Even when she was breaking ankles. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Maybe someday we'll get to see it. Fingers crossed.
One day.
We got some Stranger Things news. David Harbour kind of had a little tease this week that in season 4, some kind of huge backstory involving the Hopper character is going to be revealed. So that could be interesting. I can't think of what that would be, but he said that it's going to be really, really, really big news once it happens. It's
intriguing. He's saying backstory. Obviously, we know there's something with the character being still alive, and with the Russians from the teaser trailer. That I think that's weird that they're going to have a backstory. So God knows what it is. Was he a Russian spy?
Yeah, they kind of referenced something. They referenced that. I believe it was in season 2 when they're out at his cabin. I believe that Elle was like in a basement or was in some spare room or something, and there were some boxes that had labels on them, and it's going to kind of go back to that. So there was 4 boxes that were labeled with 4 different things, and it's going to kind of reference back to that scene, and it's going to have something to do with that.
Interesting.
So, no idea.
Yeah, we'll find out.
We'll tell with that as well. We will find out. And finally, this week, we did mention, this was several months back, that CBS had ordered a pilot for a series about the character Clarice from Silence of the Lambs that was going to take place about a year after the movie's events. Well, CBS has officially ordered Clarice the series. So it's being picked up for the 2020-2021 season. So, that may also get delayed at this point with everything going on, but they have officially picked it up, so it's going to happen.
I'll get on them. They get to make a show if they ever get a chance to. Obviously, the pilot went well.
It must have. So I know I'm interested to see that. It's something about that series that I enjoy. So, I was a fan of the sequels, the sequel and the prequel. So, I don't know. I'm curious to see where they go with it.
Awesome. So as am I. Well, what do you guys think about that or anything else we talked about here in the news segment? Or you want to drop in later on when we talk about Psycho 2? Whatever you want to do, go ahead and hit us up on our social medias. We're on Facebook, Horror Zone 607. We're on Twitter and Instagram at Horror Zone 607. Use that hashtag HZ607 whenever talking about the show. Also, you can visit 8122productions.com. Check out our archives. Check out the Three Fat Nerds page, the Wrestling Show page. Check out friends of the show like the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour and so much more. All there on 8122productions.com. And last but certainly not least, if you'd like to support the podcast monetarily, help us fund what we do here and get a ton of extra bonus content for as little as $1 a month, you can do that on Patreon at patreon.com/8122productions. Get a ton of bonus content and you get a lot of special stuff. So check that out if you will. And it does go all to help the show. I know you guys can't hear the new soundboard yet because Mike is taking up the iPad as he is in a bunker, not in studio. But one day, hopefully we'll have him back and we can resume all the crazy stuff that we have going on here in studio. With that being said, though, we are going to take our break. When we come back, it's going to be the Horror Zone 607 review. And of course, it's the second week of 5 weeks of Psycho. That means we're talking about Psycho 2. So we'll be right back.
Can you imagine a world immune to all forms of cancer?
Ladies and gentlemen,
the time has come for our 4th annual live stream for The Cure.
And this year, we need your help more than ever.
Please join us May 27th through May 31st for 48 hours of live content from guests and podcasts around the world.
We'll be aiming for our most ambitious goal to date as we try to raise $10,000 for the Cancer Research Institute.
Please visit www.livestreamforthecure.com for more information on this year's event and how you can be a part of it. Together, we can make a difference.
Welcome back to the Zone, and now it is time for the Horror Zone 607 review segment. And of course, as we said before, it is week 2 of 5 weeks of Psycho. Everybody's getting stir crazy. Everybody's stuck in a house, but nobody's house is quite like the Bates house. And this week, of course, we are going to the direct sequel. All of them were in the same film line, but it is the direct sequel of Psycho, although it came out 23 years later. That's right. Psycho 2, of course, the release date is June 3rd, 1983, if you remember correctly. The first movie came out in 1960. So, I mean, there's a big jump between here and there. The runtime of this movie is 113 minutes. It was written by Tom Holland, of course, based off of characters by Robert Bloch. I'm going to get to a fun fact about him in a minute. It was produced by Hilton A. Green and Bernard Schwartz and directed by Richard Franklin. It was done for a budget of $5 million and made $34.7 million in the box office. Now, I said that I wanted, before we talk about the movie, I will note to the same year that Psycho 2 came out, Robert Bloch actually wrote a sequel to Psycho. Did you know that, Mike?
I did know that.
Yes, but his sequel, his book, was actually completely different than the movie we got. You see, his book was more like a slasher film, and the fact that Norman escapes from prison and then proceeds to go around and kill a bunch of people. And that's what people would assume that Psycho 2 is going to be about. But no. Universal Studios and of course, the director, Richard Franklin, decided he wanted to make more of a thriller whodunit, which is kind of the basis of the original. I mean, there's more kernels. And, of course, he wanted to hit you with that great twist ending, which he does both. He lands both sticking points, in my opinion. Let's talk about the synopsis of the film. Of course, I realize this movie came out in 1983, but if you would like to see the film first and you haven't already seen it, I suggest you go watch it, because we will talk about some spoilers, because this movie has twist endings. So just so you guys know, if you don't care about it being spoiled or, whatever, go ahead and just listen. But it is a great movie to see if you've never seen it. I suggest watching it, and if I do suggest watching it without knowing the spoilers as well, because it definitely has a more impact on you if you don't know what's coming in the twist. But I want to be fair and forewarn everybody. So if not, we won't be offended. Just go ahead and pause it here, go watch the movie, and then come back. If you've already watched the movie because you knew this was coming up, because we let you know anyways, or you've seen it before, it's time for you to hear our take. So let me give you the overview of the movie real quick. We open up, of course, with Norman Bates being released from prison due to the fact that he is now allegedly cured. Because, of course, he was guilty on facts of being mentally insane. So they get him out, and of course we have a pivotal scene right in the beginning with of Lila, of course. By the way, Lila was reprised by the original actress. Did you know that, Mike?
Yeah,
yes.
Miles.
Yes, right. That's pretty much. So Lila Crane is there. She basically says, you're going to kill again. Yeah, so she's kind of acting like the crazy person from a Friday the 13th movie. I just got to throw that out there. That was really, of course, the psychiatrist takes Norman back to the Bates house. Of course, Anthony Perkins is also back in the role of Norman Bates. Norman then, has, it's weird. You put a crazy man back in a house that drove him nuts. He sees a couple things. There's some notes that he runs across. I mean, I'm going out of order a little bit. He gets a job at a local diner where some of the town folk, they're not feeling old Norman and what he did and how he's out. And some of the town folk don't care as much. There he meets Mary, who is a waitress there, played by Meg Tilly. If you didn't know, Meg Tilly is the sister of Jennifer Tilly. There you go.
Yes.
So both of them made their way in the world of horror. So anyways, Mary ends up, a long story short, Mary ends up taking him up on an offer to live in the Bates home because she has no place to stay. Fast forward, we get you got some kids that break into the house and they get murdered by somebody in a wig, in a dressed just like Mother. Could it be Norman is back to his old ways? Could it be that he is dressing like Mother again? Or is somebody trying to set up our young Norman Bates? Who knows? Got to stay tuned. Of course, Norman is now being tortured by either his own voices in his head or somebody else, because he's getting phone calls. He's finding those notes that I pre-mentioned because he's finding them throughout the whole movie. There's different situations that he finds himself in throughout this movie where he is like, thinks he's losing his mind again. And it's taking you down the dark rabbit hole. I think they do a very good job of that. Once again, skipping a bunch of stuff. When, like I said, we're not going to go scene for scene. We get to a point where we find out that Mary has a dark secret. Mary is actually Mary Loomis, the daughter of Sam Loomis and Lila Crane. Here's the funny part. Lila married the lover of her sister, and they had a child together.
Yep.
That was the first part I thought was crazy. Now we find out that Mary is there to do her mother's bidding, including dress up like Mother. Little crazy. She tells her mom she's not going to do her bidding anymore because Mom says, hey, you got to dress up as Mother one more time because it's needed to send him over the edge completely. And she disagrees with it. So her mother, Lila, goes to the house and dresses up like Mother, only to be murdered by somebody else dressed like Mother. I know it sounds crazy, but it actually is
confused.
It's confusing, but you know what? It's actually pretty cool. And then Mary ends up dressed like Mother and encountering Norman Bates. Like I said, I skipped over a bunch of stuff. Once again, we're not doing the whole scene for scene, which is I think it's one of the most disturbing scenes in the film when Mary's dressed up like Mother and she's stabbing at Norman and it's hitting him in the hands. And then she stabs at him and he grabs the blade of the knife as she's cutting and he's looking at her all crazed. I thought that for some reason, I think that moment of the movie is like, holy shit. You know what I mean? That's nuts. I don't know what it is with the stabbing of the hand that really kind of bothers me, but it was weird because
that seems very hard to watch.
Yeah. I mean, I missed over when Lila Crane gets it. She has one of the best kills in 80s horror movie history. She takes a knife right through the mouth and out the back of her head. And it looks very good. I should have mentioned that. I'm sorry. I am doing a bad job of hosting this, not mentioning that. I thought it's one of my favorite kills in a horror movie. This movie is not a slasher film by any stretch of the imagination, but that's a very slasher-esque kill. But Norman...
It really was.
Yeah. Roundabout way, Mary meets her demise by the hands of who we find out is the real killer. And the real killer is the lady who owned the shop, the diner that Norman works in, which is weird because she gets very little screen time up until this point. She seems
kind of nurturing. She seems like a sweet old lady. Just kind of works there, and you kind of see her just kind of like checking things out from the background.
So she's got she's got very little. It's Emma Spool is her name, and she is played. Spool. Yes, it's Emma Spool, and she's played by Claudia Breyer. She does a great job. I gotta be honest. I thought it was great, but you don't see her much in the movie, and then you realize that guess what? She says and reveals that she is actually Norman Bates' real mother. So, what a twist! Not only have we had Mary Loomis running around trying to make Norman crazy, wearing Mother's dress, trying to get him to have a glimpse and have a mental break. Not only has Lila Crane has been behind that, but now, remember I said earlier, there was a young man and a couple that got murdered in the house. Then, of course, Lila Crane gets murdered in the house. There's a couple other murders as well. And, of course, at the end with Mary, and the murderer is actually this Emma Spool, who is now revealing herself to be the real mother of one Norman Bates.
Right, and the sister of Norman's
real mother
from the previous movie.
Yes. Yeah, you get it even more deep in there, but it gets better because that's not even the end of the movie. We got another little bit of the movie. If you didn't think that it was a twist to find out that Lila Crane was the mother of who turns out to be Mary and Mary Loomis, if you didn't think it was a twist to find out that Sam Loomis and Lila Crane had a kid, if you didn't think that it was even a twist that Mary is the one turning on Norman, and then you didn't think it was a twist that his mother is a different woman, Oh, it gets better because as they're sitting at the table, Norman asks his mother if she wants a sandwich, and right after, whacks her ass upside the head with a fucking shovel, and then proceeds to put her up in the room in the rocking chair because she made the mistake of saying going to normal, and normal to Norman Bates is having a dead mother in a rocking chair in the attic.
There it is.
There it is. And of course, we have a really great shot at the end of the movie. You see the silhouette of the body in a chair as Norman is standing outside in what looks like to be a thunderstorm, and that's where the movie cuts. It's a great cinematic scene. It's also the scene that technically is in the movie poster as well. They edited some things out, obviously, but it's in the movie poster as well. So it's a really good shot. With that being said, that's kind of the movie in a nutshell. Once again, we're not gogging down by going over things. So if I missed something, don't shoot me, but I'm not going to give you scene for scene of the movie. But that's, the gist of the movie. It's a great whodunit. You really believe different things throughout the movie. You don't know what to believe. And by the end of it, you're like, holy shit, what did I just see? Not in a bad way though. Cause I like good twists when they're executed. I also want to point out that there is Oz Perkins is in this movie as well. He plays the young Norman Bates in a flashback scene. So go figure.
Yes, he does.
Go figure. Before he was making bad movies, he was in Psycho.
Before he was making terrible movies, he was playing young Norman Bates.
I so wish the professor was here for that.
Yes, I do too.
But he's off.
Convalescing at home right now.
He's convalescing. He's right now nursing that hangover while watching Freddy's Dead. I got it in there. I got it in there at the professor's expense. There you go. So now let's dive into the review section. And I'm going to say before you come up, I'm going to let you break it down. And then what we'll do is I'll give a little review, let you give a little review, and then we'll do I'll tell the scores on the things on the internet, and then we'll give our scores. But for me, I'm gonna put it this way to you. As far as my review overall, I love the feel of this movie. I love the fact that they, even though it's the granddad of slasher films, they didn't do what the 1983 thing would have been and to make it a slasher film. I like the fact that they kept it as a whodunit. I mean, the original, as we talked about before, I mean, it was more see-throughable, if you will, but it was still kind of a whodunit at the end of the day because at times you questioned whether it was Norman or Mother or whoever the hell it was because you didn't know. You know what I mean? So I think that was a good thing. I also love that the homage by the cinematographer of this movie. Let me look up his name because I want to give him credit because I turned off that page to look up all of the wonderful actors and actresses. Cundy. Yes, there you go. Dean,
of course, behind the original Halloween.
That's right. He also worked with Hitchcock in the past as well as an assistant director.
Yeah.
So he has had one hell of. I was going to say he has had one hell of a career in Hollywood. But anyways, he paid a great homage to Alfred Hitchcock by putting a bunch of Hitchcock shots in the movie. He used the vertigo shot in the movie. He used the bird's eye shot in the movie. He definitely did the work. It looks and feels very much like not just the original, but it looks and feels like a Hitchcock reference. There is a Hitchcock Easter egg in the movie. I don't know if you caught it, Mike. There's a silhouette that looks like Alfred Hitchcock when they enter a room. They enter a room, they hear a noise, and against the closet before they turn on the light, you can see the famous silhouette of one Alfred Hitchcock. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, but it's an amazing homage to put that in there, obviously on purpose. They wanted to make sure that came in. And once again, like I said, they used the vertigo shot, they used the bird's eye shot, they used a lot of like shots that Hitchcock was known for. So they kept it very familiar in the back of your head. If you're a fan, especially a fan of Hitchcock, you knew what you were watching, and it was very familiar. And I appreciated that. I loved the score to this movie. I thought that they did some really neat and brave things with the score, and it paid off big way. It wasn't just a normal brooding score in a horror movie. On different levels, you had different things. There was some lighter tone music to when things were going well. Whenever Norman looked like he was going manic, the music kind of got faster and more stern. They did an amazing job on the sound of this movie. Like I said, the looks and the shooting of it were great, and I can't say enough about the story. I thought the story was a very good continuation. I'm glad they didn't stick with the sequel that Robert Bloch made. Not that the book wasn't good, but it's like it would have taken this to the normal slasher area. And I think this movie was better being the way it was. And I really do enjoy this movie. Mike, what are your review takeaways for Psycho 2?
So, first of all, I'm going to echo, everything that you said. The music is great. Cinematography was great. They did an excellent job. Now, a lot of people might say, you're taking one of the greatest horror movies, one of the greatest movies in cinema history in Psycho, one of the most legendary movies of them all, and you're trying to make a sequel to it. How can you do that? How can you make a sequel to it? There's no way this would work. And they made it work. 23 years later, no less, they made it work. And, I don't know that the original Psycho ever needed a sequel, but boy, did they do it justice once they did. If there's anything, that I would say to it that maybe I would have liked to have seen that was different with it, and I'm just going to pitch this to you, Rich, just to see what you think. But what if they'd filmed it in black and white? Mm-hmm.
It would have been a better homage, if you will, but I like that they made it feel like the time. You're telling a story because they did it in real time. That's one of the things I should have said that I enjoyed too.
True.
They did the sequel in real time. So this movie takes place technically because when they filmed it was 22 years, even though it aired in 23.
Right.
So it takes place 22 years after the original film in real time. And it does invite the actors back. So that means you see the same actors, you see them actual legit age 22 years. And on top of that, it deals with the fact that he's been locked up for 22 years. So it is in that aspect, I feel like it was very good.
Yeah.
The black and white would have been a cool homage, and I'm not saying it wouldn't. I think it would, from a stylistic shot, it would be cool looking. However, I like the fact, the only reason I would like it, I like it like this, I think better the way it was shot, is because think about it, it makes it look like it progressed to your eyes from 1960 to 1983 as well.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point. I didn't think of that when I opened my big mouth there. So, you
no, but to each their own. I will give you this. I do think artistically it would have looked amazing in black and white. They did a very good job of. They did a very good job with their colors and stuff. However, the one thing that I wouldn't have liked in black and white was the kill, because the kill on Lila was amazing. It's a brutal kill. Was. It's a knife through the mouth. It comes out the back of the head. The makeup artist was amazing on this film. It looked amazing. It's the most brutal kill in the movie. I would say it's the second most brutal thing in the movie because I guess I just have a thing with hands. So that whole hand scene with Norman and Mary is fucking crazy. Here's a takeaway I want to know if you noticed or not before we go into grading. Did you notice that the most crazy person in this movie, the movie's called Psycho. We know it's the Norman Bates story, but he's not the biggest psycho in this movie. Lila Crane is the biggest psycho in this movie.
She really is.
They do a good job of putting her in that lighting. And think about this. She is putting her daughter in harm's way. She has put her daughter in harm's way. Her daughter is living in the house of a man that she knows, or she's telling everybody is a crazy killer who killed 7 people in 1960. Because remember, he was convicted of 7 murders, including her sister, the aunt of her daughter. And she is putting her daughter in that house to make him go crazy, to poke the fucking bear, to the point that at one point in the movie, Mary hands Norman a butcher knife to cut a sandwich while she's sitting next to him. And he looks at, and there's a real uncomfortable moment where he's looking at the knife, looking at her, and finally she kind of has the uncomfortable, like, is there something wrong, Norman? And you could tell she's nervous. And you're like, oh my God, what parent, browbeats their kid in that? Not to mention making her dress up like Mother. And on top of it, she does the shower scene. She tries to entice him with a shower, knowing that her aunt died in a shower. To a butcher knife to this man.
She's that obsessed with trying to take him down and trying to, put him back in prison. So you're absolutely right. She really is the main antagonist in this movie, whereas she's, one of the main protagonists, I guess you could say, in the first movie, the original movie. She's the main antagonist, more than Emma Spool. She's the main antagonist.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Emma Spool is such an outside thing. The Emma Spool thing, quite honestly, that part of the twist, it wasn't as good for me. I mean, because
it threw me for a loop.
Once again, I didn't see it coming, but I don't know if I liked it so much. And it gets retconned out. And we'll talk about it next week. It gets retconned out in part 3. The fact that that's his mother. They could have just left it at it was the sister. It was his aunt taking care of him. Those people were trying to take advantage of you, Norman, and I was taking care of you, and show that the family as a whole, the family Bates, if you will, is just full of psychos.
They're all crazy.
Yeah. So I mean, I thought that would have been a better touch. Mine again. I'm backseat driving, and if that's and by the way, that is my only qualm with the movie. Like, honestly, I don't really have many qualms with this movie, plotline wise, because the other plotline that you see a lot on the internet is that people have a problem with the fact that he was released from prison, but people get released from prison all the time for weird things and sent back to bad situations. Like, this happens all the time in the real world. Just look in the real media. So if you have a problem that he got released from prison because he was mentally cleared and sent back to the house that he was in. Go through on a daily basis, or just go through. You can find it real quick about inmates who were released back into bad situations where they recommitted crimes. It happens all the time in the real world. So that's not a plot hole to me. The only plot hole is, and I mean, it's not really a plot hole with the mother. I just would have preferred if she would have just stayed the aunt, because then it would have made, I don't know, it was convoluted, if you will. I like the twist. It's just convoluted. If she was still the aunt, then it's less convoluted, because you're like, oh, that explains why he got the job. And that explains, her little lurking in the background. You know what I mean? She was watching her nephew because obviously her sister is dead. I think that,
the bigger issue I have with Emma Spool and her character, and obviously I'm not going to get into too much of Psycho 3 until next week when we talk about it, but in the third movie, the private investigator lady and the cop go to Emma Spool's house to do some searching, and on Emma Spool's, I don't know if it's her desk or her end table, she has a picture of herself there. She has a picture of herself in her own apartment that she lived in alone. I don't know if you ever caught that.
Yeah.
When you watch,
we'll talk about that next week for sure. But it is weird that she gets.
I always thought that was kind of funny.
I mean, I just wanted to bring up now that it does get retconned out next movie, which Psycho 3 takes place in 1986, only a 3-year turnaround, and is a direct sequel, obviously, to Psycho 2. With the exception that they retcon some things that they didn't like out. And that was one of them, that she was the real mother of Norman Bates. They go back to the original mother, which is fine. But I think they should have kept her as the aunt. I would have liked that better. And that's it. If that's my only bone to pick, really, with the plot of the movie, I thought it was a great whodunit. It keeps you off edge. Just when you think you know what's going on, they change it. And it's a good way, you find out, find out Lila's pulling some strings, but then you find out that Mary is actually Mary Loomis, and that's Lila's daughter. And then you're like, oh shit, she's over here, being with Norman and trying to whatever, but she's actually trying to goad Norman into going crazy. And then at the same time, she tries to get out of doing it. Remember, she tells her mother, no, she's not going to mess and she's not going to live for the dead anymore, but then still finds a sense of duty to do it because she doesn't realize her mother is dead at one point. Until after she is discovered in mother's clothing, and then and that's when we get
I don't think that she ever does find out.
Oh yeah, that's
that
right. She does.
Dead.
No, she doesn't find out. Yeah, but she still, she gets discovered, so she does a sense that she still does her mom's bidding, because not knowing her mom's dead, she dresses up like mother, and then she confronts Norman. Well, she doesn't mean to confront Norman. Norman catches her. At this point,
she cares about Norman. She started to care about him and didn't like what her mother was doing, and she got to know him and thought that he was kind and sweet, and she actually was trying to talk him down off the ledge, because at this point, she doesn't know that Emma Spool is calling him. She thinks that he's, losing it.
She thinks she's about the notes. Yeah, the notes and catching a glimpse and blah, blah, blah. That's all she knows.
Right.
Yeah. But at the same point in juncture, I just think it's weird that she puts herself into the position. At the end, she still and I understand she's trying to talk him down, but still, she's still doing the thing that would trigger him. It's a weird convoluted thing, but I get it because I can go with it because the story is that way. She's doing things for her mother, and then she's trying to serve two masters, and it's just not working out for her, the poor girl. And then, of course, she meets her demise by the hands of the real killer of this movie. Because technically, Norman only
correct.
Of course, Norman only gets one body in this movie.
Right.
Like I said, he has to go back to normal.
Yeah, exactly. But a couple other things I just want to kind of mention that I like about this movie is, first of all, the style that it was shot in. This was something that, if I'm not mistaken, Alfred Hitchcock was already gone. He'd already passed away by the time it came out. Yes, he was already passed away. It was shot very much in the same style that the original one was. A lot of the same camera angles and things like that. Like you mentioned, the music was perfect for it. So it had, although it was in color and it was more quote unquote modern, obviously this was, almost 40 years ago now, but it was modern for its time. It still had the same, atmosphere to it. It really felt like a perfect sequel to it. A lot of the things now they filmed the original movie. They filmed all of them at Universal Studios. I believe the fourth one was actually filmed at Universal Studios Florida, if I'm not mistaken, but we'll get to that when we research that, when we do that in a couple of weeks. But the original one was done at Universal Studios Hollywood, California, and this one was as well, except the original Bates house was still standing, but they had demolished the original motel itself. So they actually moved the Bates house to a different location for this movie, reconstructed the original motel, but they actually came across out there in their archives a lot of the props that were from the original movie. Things like the Tiffany lamps, the stuffed owl and the raven that you see in the original movie, the brass hands that you see in Mrs. Bates' bedroom, the fireplace that's in the bedroom, her bed in the armoire, the runner that's on the staircase. All those things are from the original movie, and they put them in this one. So it really, they a lot of these movies, when they recreate for a sequel, they recreate it. That's what it is. I am always fascinated when they use original locations, when they use original items from the movie. To me, it's more authentic. And this movie was very authentic to the first, as compared to the original movie. And so that's one of the things that I've always really, really, really enjoyed about this movie. To me, again, Psycho did not need a sequel. And, I guess, on one hand, this kind of gets, for me, it kind of gets points taken away because it didn't need a sequel, but at the same time, it was a perfect sequel to it. So it gets the points right back. So to me, when we're talking about horror movie sequels, this is one of the greatest sequels that's ever been made to any legendary movie, horror movies. This is one of the best ones. It was done well. They really meticulously went into great detail to make it feel authentic and make it feel like it truly was a sequel to Alfred Hitchcock's work, to really pay tribute to him. So to me, this movie really, really was one of the better sequels ever made to any horror movie, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I agree with you. It is definitely one of the best sequels ever made. It is also one of the most underrated movies, especially sequels or any otherwise. And the reason why is I'm going to share with you some of the scores from this movie. It's going to sound that way. Metacritic had it at 54%. Rotten Tomatoes has it at 59%. IMDb has it at a 6.5 out of 10. Google users have it at 87%. So, I mean, obviously amongst fans, it is definitely getting a really good thing. I did come across this that I kind of wanted to read before we gave it, because I think that this shows you sometimes people we trust are out of touch. From June 6, 1983, Roger Ebert wrote, and this is just a quick snippet of his Psycho 2 review. He says, "If you've seen Psycho a dozen times and can recite the shots in the shower scene by heart, Psycho 2 is just not going to do it for you," which I couldn't disagree with him more. Because if you're a fan of the original movie, I feel like this movie ties in perfectly with the original movie, especially as it aged. That's personally me. But then again, I don't judge everything about what Roger Ebert thought, because there's a lot of things that he thought that were just flat wrong. Roger Ebert was the same guy who, if you remember correctly, said that Jurassic Park was trash and wasn't going to make any money. And what did Jurassic Park do again? Oh, yeah, it was the highest grossing box office film at the time. So.
Yeah, keep in mind, this is a guy that hated horror, and Gene Siskel, his old partner for this, was the guy that gave away Friday the 13th when they did the review on that movie. And if I'm not mistaken, actually published addresses of the actors that were in the movie to tell people to go after them. Yeah. This is the same people that did that. I don't put a lot of stock in the things that they did. No,
neither do I. I just wanted to put out how touch he is. So when people put Roger Ebert, who is no longer with us, so it's bad. It's ill to talk about the dead sometimes, but there's a lot of people who used to put stock into Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel. Siskel and Ebert were looked at one way. They were nothing but shills who were paid by the movie industry to pump out things. I don't believe that they ever had a real true opinion. Anybody who ever watched this movie, and there's a lot of critics at the time and even now who have made this movie very underrated, but it's found its audience because I went online to YouTube after I had watched the movie and I was doing my review, and I was looking up, and it came a time and time again. I did not find a negative review of it on YouTube. A lot of people saying how it was the most underrated movie of all time. It was the greatest horror sequel of all time, much like you just said. I have seen a lot of those sentiments. If you look at the Google users, 87% love this movie. I mean, it's definitely a movie. Now we got to go to our thing. I obviously let the cat out of the bag a little bit, but this is my favorite movie in the series. Not taking away from anything of the original. The original will be a classic. The better movie of the two is the original because, I mean, it's just a classic. And without the original, you don't have this movie. Let's get that out in the open. But as far as entertainment value, for myself, by the time I got to see the 1960 classic, it was really, like I said last week, and the reason I don't put it up there a lot of times with things like Halloween or Jaws is by the time I saw it, it was already antiquated, if you will. It was black and white. Right. The stuff that was shocking in 1960 was not shocking to a young man. Whether I think it was in the early 80s, or well, it had to be in the early 90s that I saw this, because I was a young boy. I was definitely under the age of 12, and I was born in '83, so we're probably looking at sometime between 90 and 92 that I saw the original. I think I saw the first time I saw the sequel was probably when I was about 16, so we're talking 1999. Because I used to watch me and my friends used to get together and watch a lot of horror movies, and I didn't even know there was a sequel to this movie, believe it or not, until then. Because, obviously, when I was young, my mom wasn't exactly like, here, Rich, go ahead and watch this. But Psycho was safe at the time, when I saw it when I was a young lad, because my mom's like, he's not going to be super scared. It's not like there's a lot of boobs or anything in it, like the horror movies of the 80s, as we all know. It's obviously, pure, if you will. And I think that's why I've never had.
Right.
I respect the art of it. I respect Hitchcock, and that's why it always gets a high score. Like I gave it a 9 last week, and I only do that out of the respect and knowing it's a classic. But as far as entertainment for me, I just never had done it because of those reasons. And whether you like it or like what my opinion or not, that's fine. But I think that's a very good opinion to have. I still give it a high score because obviously it's one of the classics of horror movies, and I love the shooting of the original. Now, with that being said, this one is my favorite. I'm entertained by this movie. I love the fact that it has the twist endings. I love the continuation of the story. I thought that they did everything well, from the shooting of it to the score. Like I said, the only thing I would put, gun to my head, the only thing I would really change is the fact that I would have just made it his aunt instead of his mom. But whatever, that's just nitpicky at that point in juncture. There's a few other little like, whatever problems. So overall, I give this movie an 8.7. It's not quite as high as the original.
Wow.
It's not quite as high as the original, but if you remember, I bumped the original up because of being a classic. I don't bump this up because it's not technically a classic, but I give it an 8.7 out of 10. But it is I preface that with it's it's definitely the most underrated horror sequel of all time. Probably the greatest horror sequel of all time. It's a complete tie-in. You don't have any of the issues. Everybody else tries to jigsaw in a sequel. I mean, neatly reminded of Nightmare on Elm Street 2. You know what I mean? Or even as good as Friday the 13th Part 2 is, it's a whole nother beast because obviously it's now Jason and not his mother. You know what I mean? Halloween 2, it gets a little close because it's a continuation, but Halloween 2 really pales in comparison to the original Halloween. As far as the original Halloween is damn near a perfect movie shot, front to back, and Halloween 2 has a lot of issues. Let's be honest. I still love it, but it's got a lot of issues. And on top of that, it's like Jaws. Let's not even talk about the Jaws sequels. And Jaws is an amazing movie. So when you have a classic movie, the reason I bring those movies up, and I could bring other ones up, is those movies are all classics in my mind. Those movies are all movies, the originals are all these classic movies, and all of theirs fall way short. Like Halloween 2 is a gun to the head right now, and I haven't watched it. I know we'll review it probably at Halloween time. Is off the top of my head without seeing it again in a little while is like a 7.5 or 8. I mean, I won't give you the exact number because I haven't seen it in a while, but I know it's not as high as an 8.7. You know what I mean? Probably the closest to that would be Friday the 13th too, only because I love the parts of that movie that work really well. But at the same point in juncture, I don't think it's as good as the classic that was the original. And this is right on the door. Literally, I would be at the same score, but I gave a little bit more because of the classicness to the Hitchcock classic. So that's really the only deduction. And other than that, they're very much on par with each other. And I suggest seeing this movie. If you do not watch any of the other Psycho movies we cover, this is the movie you should see. If you haven't already seen it, I hope we convinced you to watch it because I think it's amazing. So, Mike, what is your grade, knowing that you grade a little harder usually?
Yeah. So again, I agree with pretty much everything you're saying. And usually we have a little bit of a difference of opinion, although we generally, I think we agree on most things. We're pretty similar with what we think. So I agree with almost everything you say. With this. So again, I think that maybe I like the twist being Emma Spool, saying that she's the mother. I think that maybe I like that a little bit more than you, just because it kind of took me by surprise, and I dug that. But you got a movie that's got great acting. It's 22 years later when they're filming it, and Anthony Perkins, although he's aged, he plays the role just as perfectly as he did the first time. Vera Miles was great. We didn't even talk about some of the other people that were in this. Robert Loggia was in this movie. The great Robert Loggia. Dennis Franz. Another one of the antagonists in the movie, Dennis Franz, is Mr. Toomey. So, it has a great cast, shot so well. Music is fantastic. It's just as suspenseful as the first one, I would say. It has all the looks and all the feels. And again, I have to look at a list of all the sequels, the horror movies out there, but this is definitely amongst the best that ever have been made. So in terms of a score for this, I give the original one a 9 out of 10. I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. It is that good of a movie. It's not. I hope that doesn't come across as a harsh score. I think that's an excellent score for this.
Well, for you, it is. I mean, anybody who knows your grading, anybody who knows your grading curve, it is, because you're definitely a harder grader. I've always said to me, I'm a little lighter on the grading, and separating it out. But everybody has their own system. But for an 8 for you is a great score, especially on a 9. Like I said, I
the
put
only
this
reason
really
it's not
close.
a higher score is because. Yeah, I mean, if the original one is a 9 out of 10, this one to me just is just a scotch less than the original movie, just because it's not the original. It's hard for me to come across something that I find is better than the original. This one is so close. It's so close. It's just a teensy tiny little bit less, in my opinion.
It's definitely the greatest sequel.
8 out of 10 is an excellent score.
It's definitely the best sequel of a horror movie ever, in my opinion.
Exactly.
There's I don't think that there's a sequel that actually beats this movie as far as being the movie. There's some that can be entertaining, of course, in the slasher genre, and when we get to slasher scores, because I know we haven't covered all the big slasher movies yet as far as real reviews. When we get to them, you'll get to see some of the my realistic scores. I love the slasher genre, but I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of them get lower scores because they're not great movies. They're entertaining. Right. I will separate that for you. They're entertaining, but they're not, whatever. Like I said, Halloween 2 would be the closest that would get another high score, but not as high as this. Like I said, off the top of my head, it's been a while, but I think I would give it, and once again, we're going to cover that in the Halloween era, just hint, what we're doing for Halloween Fest this year. But off the top of my head, remembering the last time I saw it, probably a 7.5. And that's because, and I like that movie, because it is a continuation, but there is flaws in that movie, more so than this movie. This movie is very much on par as far as the storyline with the original. There's not really much veering off, with the exception of the fact that the mother reveal. And once again, I'm fine. I'm not, it doesn't make me hate the movie, but I just wish it would have just been that, because it would have been better for the story, if you will. You know what I mean?
And the fact that they retcon that in the third movie, I think kind of, in my opinion, makes that, it makes it more forgivable. Well, maybe that's why I don't mind it as much.
Maybe, but here's the thing. We'll be, obviously next week we'll be talking about Psycho 3, and I'm not going to lie to you, there's a drop off.
Right.
So I mean, I'm not trying to be like whatever, but there's a drop off, and I think that's maybe why maybe that's why it's in my mind the opposite of you. You are going, okay, well, they fixed it in the continuity, and I'm going, well, they fixed it in a worse movie. I'm giving away a little something, but I mean, whatever. You'll hear the full-on review next week, and always check it out for yourself. So at the end of the day, Mike gives it an 8. I give it an 8.7. I mean, this is a great movie. We both agree that it's probably the greatest horror movie sequel of all time. And like I said, it's my most entertaining film in the franchise. Yes, I graded Psycho as more, but as the reasons I said, the reasons that Psycho has never stepped into the realm of Halloween. My highest rating movies, as we know, are both 9.5. I won't go above 9.5. It's just, I know I say out of 10 all the time, but I just don't go above it because I don't believe in a perfect movie. And the two 9.5 movies that I have in the horror genre of all time are obviously Jaws and the original Halloween. And honestly, one day I might go into the fact, I'll tease it here, but one day I might go into the fact of, if you notice, both of those movies were not the finished product that they were intended to be.
Right.
Both the original Halloween and Jaws were intended to be something a little different, and or actually in Jaws' case a lot different. But I mean, they were both intended to be something different, and due to circumstances out of the control of the directors, who in both cases are legendary directors, they changed them on the fly, and it became, oh shit, those changes made them better. Because I believe that Jaws, if you would have gone with the original Spielberg treatment with all of the shark and everything else in it, and you see the shark all the time, that movie would not be the classic it is. And it definitely wouldn't be as high on my list. The fact that they had to go to the ambiguous shark is that. And see, the thing is, the difference between, somebody's going to say, but Rich, some of the graphics in that and stuff don't match up to today's standards. I know, but you were harder on Psycho for it. Well, the difference is that to put the antiquated thing, it still scares the shit out of you going in the ocean. Generations are now still scared if they watch Jaws. Nobody, I would find it hard to believe if anybody of our generation or even later generations is scared to step in the shower because of Psycho. I'm just saying. And the problem is that you go back to our parents' time, like my mom's time, your mom's time, your mom and dad's time, and they saw that movie and were terrified to go in the shower.
Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
my mom has even told me this. So she's like, the first time I saw Psycho, I was a young girl, and fuck, she was like, honestly, I didn't want to take a shower for like a week. She's like, I did, but I was like peeking out the door. You know, it's like, you know, it really terrified people. But by the time it hit us, we were like, oh, well, because it's black and white, it doesn't come across as much to us because we've seen worse. You know, we were.
You know what actually scared me more about being in a shower?
What?
Actually, when I was younger, that actually did bother me to a certain degree. You know, there was a part of it that kind of got me psychologically. Actually, what got me, and I hadn't even seen it at this point, but Friday the 13th Part 4, where Jason comes in and he crashes through that glass shower and breaks that kid's nose and slams his head through the neck through the glass shower. Just seeing that on the back of the package when I was a little kid roaming around in video stores, that actually scared me more than Psycho did.
And of course, Bass
so believe it or not, that's what got me without even having seen it.
Bass got ruined by Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But anyways, that's I think that's my takeaway in the two. I'm just kind of explaining where I'm coming from. But Psycho's still a classic movie. Let's be honest. Hitchcock genius shots in those movies. I said it last week, and the fact that they continued the Hitchcock shots in this movie, whether it was the exact Psycho shots or, like I said, in a couple different spots in the movie, like where he's having the flashback right before the flashback scene where the room is widening and getting longer. That's the Vertigo shot from Vertigo. They use that exact shot to go into the flashback, and I thought that was ingenious because not only does it pay a nod to Hitchcock, but it looked really good as well. So I mean, and that Vertigo shot we see a lot. You see it a lot in history now because I mean, let's be honest, a lot of the cinematography has never been the same since Alfred Hitchcock. We talked about it last week. If you talk about BC and AD, you can talk about BA or BH, whichever you want to use in age. Because before and after Hitchcock is a real thing in all of movie, because his shots have now become the shots that we see each and every time we turn on a movie or a TV show. Those are the shots we see. Before that, the shots were kind of bland, if you remember. But it's amazing.
Yeah, they really were.
Direct. Guys like Kubrick and stuff took stuff right from Hitchcock, and that's really where that move came in, because Hitchcock started doing this stuff in the 50s and early 60s, and so by the late 60s, when you have Kubrick taking off with 2001 and all the other stuff he did, and guys like Spielberg coming in the 70s, etc., they all took from Hitchcock, and it created this wonderful world that we live in now. So that's another reason why Psycho has to be so high, and that's another reason why Psycho 2 has to also be so high, because they took the exact lineage of Hitchcock, and it worked out perfect.
Right. And anybody that's going to say that Hitchcock is overrated does not know horror, does not know cinema, needs to keep their mouth shut.
I was going to say, it's not even horror, man. It's cinema. Like Hitchcock, there is not a movie today, there is not a TV show today that you watch that was not inspired by cinematography created by Alfred Hitchcock. There is not, it just doesn't happen. You don't necessarily have to like his work. You don't have to like his movies, which I don't know how you don't. They were great. But even if you don't, I'm going to tell you right now, everything you watch is based off of a Hitchcock shot. Everything.
It really
because
is.
Before Hitchcock, you can go back in time. If you don't believe me, go look at movies pre-Hitchcock, which is about 1953, I think is Hitchcock's first film. And even then, he was
right around there.
Even then, he was still shooting a little differently. So about 55, 56 is when he started shooting the way he shot. By Psycho, he had perfected it. And then after Psycho, you get directly after Psycho, you have The Birds was directly after, I do believe. And then you have...
I believe so.
And then you have Vertigo, because Vertigo came later. It came in mid-60s. And Vertigo is what he started in The Birds, that overheard bird's eye shot we talk about. The reason it's called the bird's eye shot is because it was from birds. And we use that so much in today's whatever, but you look at the color scheming and stuff of the birds, and then you look at the perfection of that later on in Vertigo. And it's amazing. And then the shots, and like I said, that Vertigo shot is an amazing shot. You see it if you've seen if you haven't, go look up Vertigo shot if you haven't seen it before, and I guarantee you've seen it in a ton of things. It's when something widens and gets longer but doesn't move. It's the back image is moving back and it looks like the room is getting bigger, or the image is moving forward and the room looks like it's getting smaller. You see it all the time, and it's an amazing shot. Once again, it is used in perfection in this movie. Can't say enough good about Hitchcock. I'm sure we will be talking about him again in the Horror Zone reviews, because there's so much that we could do for Hitchcock. But next week... Oh,
yeah. One of the things we've been talking about behind the scenes, too, just internally, was doing a list of top 10 directors, horror movie directors. Boy, you talk about... That's going to be probably the most difficult list that I'll ever come up with. Because, you know, you got Hitchcock, you got Carpenter, you got Craven, you got so many, you know, now you got people like Flanagan that are in there. And of course, the greatest director of all time, Osgood Perkins.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, there's just so many. And, one thing I was actually
making his film, by the way, making his film debut in Psycho 2.
Yes. The Birds was actually his next movie. It was 3 years later that he did. Vertigo was actually 1958, believe it or not.
Oh, it was before. I thought it was after.
It was before that, yeah. Which I think that maybe that would have thrown me off because it was in color.
Yeah, that's where it threw it off too.
Psycho was black and white.
Yeah.
So as is the Birds.
See, I was off.
The Birds. Wait, the Birds was the Birds in black and white?
The Birds is in color.
Oh, that was in color.
The Birds is in color. That's why it threw me off, because I was like, the Birds. I knew the Birds came after because of color, but I thought Vertigo, because the Vertigo has got way brighter colors. Because the Birds has darker colors. They're all the characters are dressed. All the characters are dressed in bright colors, but everything else is dark. If you noticed. So all the characters are wearing like bright colors, like oranges and yellows and reds and shit like that. And everything else around them though is dark. The houses are dark. The sky is dark. You know, it's a very looming movie. And there's it's amazing shot. But the colors of Vertigo is very colorful. So I always thought it was later, but I guess I'm wrong. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's probably because it was kind of like, you know, in the 50s things, you know, color I think was just kind of starting to get popular at that point, so it kind of had that early.
Well, I mean,
color
it's hard.
Movie.
Hard.
Maybe it was colored in pre or in post photography.
Well, back then, I was going to say back then everything was colored in post, and that would explain why it was so bright. Because you got to remember, we've had color for a long time. The Wizard of Oz was shot partially in color. It wasn't shot in color. Sorry, it was black and white. It was post-colored. Same thing was probably what happened with Vertigo. Because really, shooting on colored film didn't become a thing until the mid '60s. Is when it really became a thing to shoot on colored film. Because you know, and that's why certain things look good. Because you know, I was saying later in the thing, because 2001: Space Odyssey came out in 1968. 68, because it came out before the moon landing. Because it was before, it was before the moon landing. Because that's what people point to, that's how he got the job from NASA. If you believe the people who believe we never went to the moon, which I don't, but that's how they say Kubrick got the job from NASA, because they watched 2001: A Space Odyssey and went, "Oh, he can shoot space."
Right.
But I don't subject that. But Kubrick was amazing. Once again, though, inspired by Hitchcock. So I can't wait to go over that list as well as you brought up. But yeah, next week, Psycho 3. Check it out before we get there, and then you can tell us what you think. But tell us what you think about Psycho 2. Talk about anything we talked about. Just say hi. Whatever. Social media is where we're at. Horror Zone 607 on Facebook. At Horror Zone 607 on Twitter and Instagram. Hashtag HZ607 to join the conversation. 812productions.com is the website. Check out the archive. Check out the reviews. Check out what else we have to offer. The Three Fat Nerds and the wrestling show, of course. Friends of the show, Ocho Duro Parlay Hour. Big shouts out to Ken M, who does the wrestling show with me on that network. So it's going to be it's always an awesome time. Keep everything in house. Last but certainly not least, if you'd like to support the podcast monetarily, it's as little as $1 a month, and it does go to support everything we do here at 8122 Productions. You can do that at patreon.com/8122 Productions. You get a ton of bonus stuff, and trust me, you won't regret it. Mike, take them home.
All right, buddy. Well, thanks for manning Studio C all by yourself this week. Hopefully next week we have the professor back and his little brain boo-boo goes away. And, you know, we'll definitely want to hear what he, you know, has to say about his adventures from this week here, next week when we get there. But next week, we'll, you know, as we mentioned, you know, we'll obviously be talking about Psycho 3. So tune in to hear what we have to say about that. Also tune in to see where I am next week. Just find out where my underground bunker is, what state, what country. Maybe I'm not even going to be in this country. You know, maybe I'll be in Brazil next week.
Brazil?
You never know where I'm going to turn up. It's possible. It's possible. So yeah, find out where I am next week.
You know where I would like you to
find out.
Hey, you know where I would like you to turn up? I think you need to turn up in the Kokomo. You can take it fast or take it slow. Yeah, that's where you want to go, right down to Kokomo.
It's funny that you should say that, because when that song came out, I was about 10 years old. And my mother and my aunt used to call me Mike-a-mo from Kokomo. So that they still call me that when they hear that song. So you never know.
That's great.
You never know. I may turn up in Kokomo.
That's where you want to go.
So that is where I want to go. Way down in Kokomo. Yeah. Feed on that for the next week. Feed on that. Think about that and get back to us next week and let us know what you think of that, too. So, of course, we'll have the biggest horror movie news, and who knows what else we'll be talking about. So tune in next week, hear what we have to say about all those things. But until then, I'm Mike C. saying, see ya.